Welcome to the Flourishing Journey podcast as we facilitate a series called the AHA Leader. This series is dedicated to school leaders who are courageous enough to look in the mirror and curious enough to keep growing. Every leader has blind spots, those unseen areas that quietly shape our decisions, influence our teams, and affect our school culture in ways we don't always realize. Yet awareness brings clarity, and clarity brings growth. In each episode, we'll uncover common leadership blind spots, those hidden habits, assumptions, and patterns that may be holding us back. Together, we'll turn those blind spots into aha moments that lead to greater wisdom, stronger teams, and more flourishing schools. I'm your host, Rachael Jones, as I collaborate with Dr. Edward Bunn by inviting you to lean in, look deeper, and lead with fresh vision. Hello, flourishing practitioners. Welcome to the second episode of a 9-episode leader series on recognizing blind spots and making appropriate adjustments. Today's episode is called Resistance to Feedback, where we explore strategies for receiving and implementing healthy feedback as leaders. Welcome, Edward. I am excited as we continue this series on leadership.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm so excited about today's topic, feedback, and especially how to navigate this potential blind spot as leaders.
All right, well, let's kick it off then with our first question. Why do you think many school leaders struggle with receiving honest feedback?
Receiving honest feedback. Leadership naturally puts us in a position where people tend to filter what they say. So for Christian school leaders, and leaders in general, I think the work feels deeply personal. It's tied to mission, faith, even calling. So oftentimes feedback can feel like a critique of who we are, really, rather than what we do. And add the pressure to appear confident and even capable as a leader. And it's easy to become defensive or even, I think, dismissive. So the truth is, though, feedback, this is hard, but feedback threatens our pride, but at the same time, it strengthens our practice. And so, when we view it as, I think, a means of God's refinement rather than people's criticism, it tends to begin to shift the posture from kind of protecting our image, if you will, to pursuing growth. And I think this is a good place to be where great things can happen.
That's so true that what you said about feedback can really harm our pride, or it can be something that we put our defenses up. We don't want to hear feedback because it might hurt and sting a little bit. Well, can you share an experience where feedback completely changed your perspective or approach as a leader?
Oh, yes. Okay, if I'm honest, I remember when I was ahead of school and a teacher came to me and said, Edward, you tend to listen to respond, not to understand. And at first, I kind of brushed it off, but it stuck with me. It was there. And over time, I realized, they were right. I was listening to solve problems quickly instead of truly hearing a person's heart. And that feedback that I received changed how I approached conversations. This was a marker for me. This was a changing moment for me in my leadership. Um, I began asking more questions. I began slowing down, creating space for others to process. It completely reshaped the culture of trust in our school. Feedback, I believe, when received humbly, it often becomes the very thing that God uses to grow both our leadership and also our relationships. And it did that with this individual. It created a deeper relationship. And let me just give you an example of that. I don't want to stay here too long, but this is good. That same teacher, a year later, at the end of a school year, we're doing our end of the school year debrief. What worked, what didn't. Let's talk about these things. And our teachers gave some great input. They gave some great feedback. And after that meeting was over, I was walking out the door with this particular teacher that had given me the feedback a year earlier. And you know what he said? This was so cool. He said, you know, Dr. Bunn, we gave you a lot of ideas today, a lot of suggestions. And he goes, I don't care if you use any of our ideas. And I was like, what? He goes, I just cared that you listened today. That was powerful. I still
Wow.
hold on to that.
Wow, that's really good. And just the courage that that teacher had to
Yeah,
give you that feedback, it sounds like made a difference in your life that that teacher felt that he could do that, and that you created a safe space for that. So,
absolutely.
how do you differentiate? Because it sounds like you received helpful feedback in this instance. So, how do you differentiate between feedback that is helpful and feedback that is just distracting or irrelevant?
Yeah, I think that's a good point because, feedback can be helpful. It can be healthy for an individual, for an organization, but there's also feedback that can just create noise, right? So I think the key is discernment rooted in humility and prayer. Helpful feedback aligns with truth, right? So it points us back to the mission. It points us back to the vision. It points us back to Christ-like character. Distracting feedback, on the other hand, often comes from emotion. It comes from preference, personal agendas, or sometimes just a misunderstanding. And so I tend to ask two driving questions. Is this person close enough to the work to see accurately? Okay, that avoids the noise. And then is what they're saying consistent with what others are revealing as well? We don't need to absorb every opinion, but we do need to stay open enough to recognize when God might be speaking through someone we didn't expect.
Yeah, that's helpful. Just thinking through that because I think it's hard. Sometimes I'm sure we've all had those experiences where we have been hurt by feedback.
Yeah,
So the tendency is to just assume all feedback is bad. But really, I like what you said about just discernment through prayer because that's what we should be doing. We should be welcoming the feedback, regardless of whether we've had those bad experiences, and really figure out, is this helpful? Is this helpful for me to grow?
that's good.
So, as we transition to our last question, I think we could really stay on this topic for much longer. But what habits, routines, systems can you give a leader to put in place to intentionally seek feedback regularly?
Yeah, I think it needs to be a priority for sure. So I think in order to make it a priority for our leadership, we simply build feedback into our leadership rhythms. It's not just, your evaluation season in which you garner feedback. It's a rhythm. It's daily. It's weekly. It's monthly. Create that rhythm, and that could look like a short anonymous staff survey each semester, or it could be a stop, start, continue reflection that you do in your team meetings. But more importantly than just that rhythm, model the openness to feedback. Demonstrate that, show that, be an exemplar to your team. In other words, invite a few trusted voices to speak into your blind spots. Say things like, hey, team, I know I have blind spots. There's things I can't see as a leader, and I trust you and your discernment to speak into those to make me sharper, to help me be better. I would often ask my team this, what's one thing I could do that would make your work or even our school culture stronger? And so I think when leaders seek feedback proactively, it signals humility and even psychological safety for your team and your teachers. And over time, it begins to normalize feedback as a part of growth, and it's no longer a threat to your growth.
Wow, that's good. Good points today as we talk about feedback. Thank you for sharing your practical tips and how you have incorporated feedback into your life. I think the biggest takeaway I have from it is feedback is something that's positive. It leads to our growth, and it's something that we should actually be seeking, not just be open to it, but actually seek it on a regular basis. So, again, thank you for coming and sharing with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rachel, for these great questions. And I love this topic of feedback. And more specifically, I love diving into what our blind spots are as leaders. And so this is critical to leadership development, leadership growth, and may we continue to grow together.
Well, join us next month where we continue our leadership series with episode 3 called Mission Drift Through Busyness, where we learn to recognize when our mission begins to drift and explore strategies for helping our teams stay aligned with the school's Christ-centered mission.
This episode was part of a 9-part series called The Aha Leader, uncovering common leadership blind spots and turning them into aha moments that lead to greater wisdom, stronger teams, and more flourishing schools. Catch every episode of this series and the entire Flourishing Journey podcast at acsi.org/podcasts.